In this video, we're going to see 19th century American master Harry Pillsbury demonstrate the principles of a winning attack. Today, we're going to be looking at a game from American master Harry Pillsbury against James Hanham in Manhattan in 1893. Just a quick, for those of you who haven't studied any of the games of Pillsbury, he was an American master and one of the top players in the world in the late 19th century. He actually had even scores against the world champion Wilhelm Steinitz, as well as the second world champion Emanuel Lasker. Unfortunately, he passed away at age 33 due to illness, so he never got a chance um, to challenge for the world title, which he may have had he lived a little longer. In any case, let's take a look at this game. He started out with d4, and his opponent replied with d5, and then he played e3. And the idea here is to develop this bishop to d3, where it can attack on the typically on the king side. Okay, e6 and bishop d3. Again, this is following with our opening principles. We're trying to control the center, particularly this e5 pawn, this e5 square, as well as develop our pieces efficiently and into places where they can be useful. Knight to f6 and f4. Now, what this does, it helps to get a better grip on the e5 square, and a lot of times white's going to play his knight to f3 and then to e5, where it's going to be very strong. It does have a slight defect in that now this e4 square is weak as well, and black can post a knight there also. Just remember in chess that it's difficult to get, have your cake and eat it too. When you get some type of advantage, you are giving up, sometimes you are giving up something as well. And so the question is whether or not what you're getting is worth it. So that's always something you have to consider when making your moves in chess. Okay, black played bishop to d6, and logical development. Basically, black is also, besides the previous two principles of controlling the center and developing pieces, black is planning on castling to safety on the king side. Okay, knight to f3, b6. There's a couple purposes for this move. First, since the pawn on e6 blocks this bishop, this gives it a good spot to go either to b7 or sometimes to a6, depending on what black wants to do. b6 also supports an eventual c5 pawn lever. And what black often wants to do in this type of opening structure is to attack white's center with the c-pawn. So that's something you'll see in various openings, especially openings that open with the d-pawn. Okay? White castles, black castles, and white plays c3. And you may notice this little formation here with these pawns is called a Stonewall Formation. And it comes out of a lot of different openings, and I'm sure we'll be seeing it in the future as well. It's very solid, but as you can see, it also gives some squares to black also in terms of places where he might be able to put pieces like a knight, including e5 and c5, or e4 and c4 in this case. Okay. Here, black plays c5, like we talked about earlier, and white plays knight to e5. Okay, this knight, it's occupying this e5 square where it is strong, and black often will trade it off since it's so powerful. However, white gets something in return for this as well. If black were to take, and this is not the game, but if black were to take, white would take back with the f pawn, and after the knight retreats, we see now that white has a lot of space in, to be able to attack. And you can see here, I'm just drawing a couple lines of some of the possible attack venues and avenues for attack um, that might happen. So here, black did not take that knight on e5, so let's go back, and instead played queen to c7. Now the idea here is that if eventually black might take on d4, and now this queen would have the c file in order to operate. Okay, so what we're seeing in this game is kind of battle lines being drawn here by these pawns. Okay, white is developing his pieces to be able to attack on the king side, and black is developing his pieces to be able to eventually break through on the queen side there. So you'll see that in a lot of openings where one side operates, one side operates on one side of the board, the other side either defends or tries to counterattack on the other side, and it often depends on the efficiency of how each side developed to see who is able to win that. And we have to have a balance, and we'll see that in a little bit, between um, carrying out your own ideas and um, trying to prevent your opponent's ideas. Okay, so let's continue with the game. Knight to d2, knight to c6, and rook f3. Okay, this is called a rook lift, and you'll see it again in a lot of openings, especially where this f pawn um, has been advanced, and a lot of times this rook will help to support an attack against the king, either from the g3 square or the h3 square, and we'll see that here. Bishop to b7, rook to h3, and now black makes perhaps the key mistake of the game. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, there has to be a balance between carrying out your own ideas as well as trying to prevent your opponent's ideas. And in this case, black plays c takes d4, opening up the c file for black's use. However, as we'll see in the game, what he should have done was maybe defended, seeing all this pressure here on h7, maybe should have done something to defend. He could have played something like g6, or or h6 to block here. Both of them are decent and would have kept black in the game, and black should have taken that move to try to slow up white's attack. Instead, he takes on d4, and white goes on the attack with bishop takes h7 check. A little tongue-tied today. Black takes back with the knight, and it seems like things are okay right now, but white brings in reinforcements with queen to h5. Now we can see here that obviously if white does nothing, that he is going to be checkmated on h7. However, if he tries to bring his knight back to cover the h7 square, he'll be checkmated on h8. So black instead made some room for the king with rook to e8, and after queen takes h7 check, king to f8, e takes d4, black played f6. Again, trying to he's doing several things here. He's trying to make this knight move away from this strong post, but also he's defending this g7 pawn with his queen. This is this is going to become a little problematic for him because again he's weakening this g6 square, which we'll see what happens there. What else could he have done? He could have taken here, and after f takes e5, it's still not great for him. At this point, white definitely has an advantage, but taking this knight off might have been a little helpful, and then maybe he could try to run away with his king. But definitely white has the advantage in this position. Okay, after f6, uh, knight to g6 check, king to f7. So of course it's the only legal move. Rook to g3. Now we're starting to target this g7 square. Rook to g8, adding a defender. Now we'll notice now how important this knight is because uh, this h black would love to play at some point rook to h8 to try to drive this queen away. However, this knight covers that square, so he can't do that. Knight to f3. Notice how white just, now that he's got a little bit of a grip on the situation, he's just going to bring in some reinforcements. Knight to e7, and then a very strong move, knight f to h4. It's very important for this knight to be here. Like we mentioned, it's covering the h8 square and just covering some squares around, making it very uncomfortable for black. Knight takes g6, knight takes g6, bishop to a6, bishop to d2. Okay, this is a very subtle move, but an important one because, as we'll see, it allows this rook now to move along the first rank here. Queen to c4, and here I think black realizes that he's in trouble and he's just trying to make room for this king to escape and try to get away here. Rook to e1. Okay, very strong move. Here he's giving up the a pawn, but again, his attack is against this white king, so he's got to bring all of his pieces into the attack. Queen takes a2, knight to h8 check. Okay, and here black's in trouble. There's not much that can be done. If, for example, king to e7, then rook takes g7 check, king to f8, queen takes g8 mate. And if he takes this knight, rook takes h8, then rook takes g7 check, king to e8, queen takes h8 check, bishop to f8, and then this rook takes e6 check, king to d8, and then queen takes f8 is mate. So there's only one square that he can go to prolong things. So let's go back. He goes to f8. Okay, he's staying in contact with this rook to try to protect it. Queen to g6. Okay, can you see the mate threat here? The mate threat is queen to h7. So rook takes h8, queen takes g7 check, king to e8. And now, of course, we can take here on h8, but white instead does something better, and that's to bring in the other rook for the attack. Rook takes e6 check, king to d8. Rook takes d6 check, king to c8. By the way, if he does go back to e8, then we just have queen to d7 check, king to f8, and then rook takes f6 is also mate. Okay, so he didn't go to king 8, he has to keep going to the queen side. So it goes king to c8, rook to c6 check, king to d8. Okay, if he goes to b8, then of course queen to c7 mate. So he goes to d8, then queen to c7 check, king to e8, rook to e6 check, king to f8, and here he finishes the game beautifully with queen to g7 mate. Let's just review a couple of the most important points of this game. Of course, at the beginning, we talked about our general opening principles, which are to try to grab a piece of the center, okay, or control the center as much as possible. Also to develop our pieces effectively, and we could see here, developing the pieces where they're going to be able to coordinate with each other later. And then finally, getting our king to safety. We also talked about an important concept, the rook lift here, and we can see, especially when this f-pawn has been advanced, we can see this rook to f3, and how the rook can often participate in the attack by moving to either G3 or in this game H3. Finally, it's important to remember this pattern of attacking this pawn on H7. There's a lot of openings and there's a lot of games that you'll see where an attack starts with often a bishop sacrifice or some way of bringing pieces into the game quickly, like we saw here after bishop takes H7 check. And then we could see that white quickly brought in reinforcements to attack the king. And Pillsbury did it in a spectacular and brilliant fashion. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please press like. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel to see future videos. Besides the videos I'll be making here, there are some great chess videos at the St. Louis Chess Club channel. I recommend you check them out as well. I'll put their link in the description as well as on this video. I hope to see you soon, and thanks again.